When the great war of Kurukshetra ended, it seemed like the story was over. The armies had fallen silent, the victors had mourned their dead, and Dharma had at last prevailed. But not every warrior found closure. Somewhere in the shadows of that battlefield walked a man burning with grief. A warrior born not just of man, but of divine power. That night, while the world slept, he did something that even the gods could not forgive. And for that one act, he was cursed, not to die, but to live. A man blessed with immortality, who was cursed to suffer for it. His story did not end with the Great War. It continues even today, a whisper in the winds of time. Forgotten by history, but not by fate. This is the story of Ashwatthama, the son, the warrior, the wanderer. To understand the curse, we must first understand the blessing. Ashwatthama was not born of ordinary flesh and blood. His father was the great warrior sage Dronacharya, the royal guru to the Kauravas and Pandavas. Despite his immense knowledge, Drona lived a life of hardship in his early years. But what he desired most was not wealth or position, it was a son, a child blessed with unmatched strength and divine qualities. To fulfill this wish, Drona performed severe penance to Lord Shiva, offering prayers and austerities for years. Moved by his devotion, Lord Shiva granted him a boon, that a part of Shiva's own divine essence would be born as his son. This child, born to Drona and his wife Kripi, was said to be a partial incarnation, an ansh, of Lord Shiva himself. The moment the child was born, something unusual happened. Instead of crying like a normal baby, he let out a loud, thunderous neigh, like that of a divine horse. Because of this extraordinary sound, he was named Ashwatthama, which means, one whose voice is like a horse. But his divine nature was marked by more than just his name. From birth, he carried a radiant jewel, a mani, embedded in his forehead. This wasn't just a symbol of grace or beauty. It was a powerful protective gem. It shielded him from hunger, thirst, disease, and fatigue, and kept him safe from all kinds of weapons, wild beasts, and even celestial beings. As long as the mani remained on his forehead, Ashwatthama could not be defeated. He was fearless, tireless, and beyond the reach of ordinary human limitations, a being shaped by both a rare blessing and a heavy curse. Though born with divine blessings, Ashwatthama's early life was not filled with luxury. His father, Acharya Dronacharya, was a brilliant Brahman and a master of warfare, but he lived in poverty with his wife Kripi and their son. The family had very little to eat, and there were days when even milk was a distant dream. One day, the son of a sage who had many cattle was drinking milk. Seeing this, Ashwatthama became restless with desire and began to cry for milk. His cries pierced Dronacharya's heart like arrows. Helpless, he wandered far and wide in search of even a single cow that could spare some milk. But he could not bring himself to take from those who had little, fearing it would disturb their sacred duties. When he returned, he saw small children offering Ashwatthama water mixed with flour. The innocent child drank it happily and began to dance, saying he had drunk milk. That innocent joy, born from deprivation, broke something within Drona. His heart burned with pain and shame. This moment became a turning point in Dronacharya's life. Determined to provide a better future for his son, he left their humble dwelling and sought help from his old friend Drupad, king of Panchal. But Drupad, having grown proud of his royal position, insulted Drona and turned him away. Humiliated and hurt, Drona resolved to gain recognition and respect through his knowledge of warfare. He then journeyed to Hastinapur, where he was welcomed by Bhishma Pitama and appointed as the royal teacher of the Kauravas and Pandavas. This changed everything for Ashwatthama. He now grew up in the royal palace, surrounded by princes and trained in the finest arts of war and knowledge. Under the strict and skillful guidance of his father, Ashwatthama became a disciplined and powerful warrior. He studied the Vedas, Shastras, and the secrets of weaponry. Alongside Arjuna and the other princes, he mastered the use of divine weapons known as Divyastras, celestial weapons that required deep concentration, mantras, and purity to wield. Among these, there was one weapon that surpassed all others in power and destruction, the Brahmastra. It was said to be capable of destroying entire worlds if not used carefully. Very few warriors in history were ever taught its secrets. Ashwatthama was one of them. In character, Ashwatthama was loyal, sharp-minded, and above all, deeply devoted to his father. Wherever Dronacharya stood, Ashwatthama stood beside him, with complete faith and obedience. He was not just the son of a teacher, he was a warrior forged in the fire of hardship, discipline, and divine purpose. In skill, Ashwatthama was among the finest warriors of his time, trained in every form of warfare, and a master of powerful celestial weapons. Yet, despite this, Ashwatthama often felt he lived in Arjuna's shadow. Arjuna was not only his father's favorite student, but also celebrated across the land. This stirred a quiet resentment within him, an inner struggle between pride in his own strength and the sting of comparison. Though never spoken openly, it festered silently. Adding to this was his unshakable loyalty to Duryodhan, his childhood companion. Ashwatthama saw Duryodhan not just as a friend, but as someone who treated him with the respect and honor he craved. That bond of friendship overrode many moral boundaries, and would eventually draw Ashwatthama into choices that would stain his legacy. His inner world was a constant battleground. On one side stood the ideals of Dharma he had learned from the scriptures and his father's teachings. On the other, raw emotions, pride, anger, loyalty, and grief pulled at his heart. Ashwatthama wanted to uphold honor, but his understanding of honor was deeply personal. It was tied to two people, his father, Dronacharya, and his closest friend, Duryodhan. Whenever either of them was threatened, he could not think with reason. This inner unrest, a constant tension between righteousness and rage, continued to grow within him. It was not a simple conflict of good versus evil, but a deeper struggle between the teachings he had received and the emotions he could not control. And when the great war of Kurukshetra began, that storm finally broke. On that sacred battlefield, where brothers fought brothers and Dharma was tangled in grey, Ashwatthama's heart would be tested. His choices in the days to come would not only shape his own destiny, but would leave a scar on the legacy of the war itself. As the flames of the Kurukshetra war rose, engulfing families, kingdoms, and Dharma itself, Ashwatthama stood firmly by Duryodhan, bound by loyalty, and by his family's duty to the throne of Hastinapur. As the only son of Dronacharya, he was a commander by blood, and a warrior by destiny. On the battlefield, Ashwatthama fought fiercely. He was fearless, striking down many skilled warriors with unmatched strength and precision. Armed with divine weapons and the fire of youthful pride, he was a force few dared to face. But on the 15th day of the war, the battle shifted. The Kaurava forces were still strong, largely because of the presence of Dronacharya, who seemed invincible. As long as he held his weapons, the Pandavas could not win. His knowledge, skill, and mastery over divine weapons kept the tide in favor of the Kauravas. Desperate to defeat him, the Pandavas devised a painful plan. Bhima, following Krishna's suggestion, killed an elephant named Ashwatthama, and a cry was sent across the battlefield, "Ashwatthama has fallen." The intention was to shake Drona's will to fight by making him believe that his only son was dead. But Drona, skeptical and shaken, did not trust the words of his enemies. He needed to hear the truth from someone whose words were known to be pure, Yudhishthira, the eldest Pandava and the upholder of Dharma. When Drona approached him for the truth, Yudhishthira responded with half-truth and hesitation. He confirmed that Ashwatthama was dead, but also added, truthfully, that it was an elephant who had died. Yet that crucial detail was lost in the sounds of war, the clash of weapons, the blowing of conches. All that Drona heard was the name of his son spoken in the past tense. Shattered by grief, and convinced that the light of his life had been extinguished, Drona laid down his weapons. In that moment of surrender, he sat in silence on the battlefield, his warrior's spirit broken. And while he sat defenseless, Drishtadyumna, the son of Drupad, took the opportunity to strike. Drona was killed not in combat, but in a moment of helplessness. For Ashwatthama, this was not war. It was not strategy. It was deception leading to murder. The death of his father, slain through a trick and finished off without honor, was a wound that would never heal. His heart, already a battleground of emotion and pride, now burned with a single desire, revenge. The 18-day storm had passed, leaving behind only silence, smoke, and sorrow. The war had ended. The Pandavas stood victorious, and Duryodhan, their final rival, lay dying, his body shattered in a mace duel with Bhima. But for Ashwatthama, the war was far from over. His father, Dronacharya, had been killed through deceit. His friend, Duryodhan, was breathing his last. And in his heart burned a fury that could not be extinguished. Now driven not by duty or dharma, but by pure vengeance, Ashwatthama, along with the only two Kaurava commanders left, Kripacharya and Kritvarma, plotted a dark and desperate act. What they planned was not a battle, but a violation of every sacred rule of war, laid out in the scriptures. Under the cover of night, they approached the camp of the sleeping Pandava forces. What followed was not a fight, it was a slaughter. Ashwatthama entered like a shadow of death, striking down unarmed, sleeping warriors who had already laid down their arms after the war. He captured Drishtadyumna, the commander of the Pandava army and the slayer of his father, and killed him mercilessly, denying him a warrior's death. He showed no restraint, no mercy. His mind was clouded with rage, and his hands moved with the fury of grief. In the darkness, he entered the tent where the 5 sons of Draupadi lay sleeping. Mistaking them for the Pandavas themselves, Ashwatthama killed them, believing he had finally avenged his father. But when the truth emerged, it was a horrifying realization. The ones he had slain were just innocent children, the next generation, unarmed, unaware, and entirely defenseless. It was a night not of war, but of adharma, an unforgivable act that stained his soul and sealed his fate. When the Pandavas learned of the massacre, grief turned into fury. They chased him down, determined to bring him to justice. But Ashwatthama, cornered and desperate, chose not to surrender. Instead, he performed an act that would draw the wrath of the divine. He invoked the ultimate weapon, the Brahmastra, a divine missile of immense power, meant to be used only with precise control. Arjuna, in response, released his own Brahmastra to counter it. The clash threatened cosmic destruction, and sage Vyasa intervened, urging both warriors to withdraw their weapons. Arjuna obeyed, but Ashwatthama, lacking the knowledge to retract it, redirected the Brahmastra in a horrifying act of vengeance. He aimed it at Uttara, the young widow of Abhimanyu, who carried in her womb the last hope of the Pandava lineage, the unborn child, Parikshit. His intention was clear, to wipe out the future, to end the Pandava bloodline forever. As the Brahmastra sped toward Uttara's womb, the cosmos held its breath. A blinding radiance cut across the sky, carrying the power to destroy the last hope of the Pandava lineage before it could continue. But Lord Krishna, with his divine power, shielded the unborn child, Parikshit. Though the weapon's heat briefly stilled his tiny heartbeat, Krishna's touch restored life. And so, the future of the Kuru race was preserved. tradition demanded the death of a killer who had violated every rule of righteous warfare, slaughtering the sleeping, striking at a pregnant woman, and unleashing a Brahmastra without just cause. But Lord Krishna did not order Ashwatthama's death. Instead, he gave him a punishment far more terrible than death itself. He declared that Ashwatthama, the son of Dronacharya, would live for thousands of years, unable to die, yet never truly alive. His body, once strong and radiant, would now be covered in wounds that would never heal. These wounds would ooze with blood and pus, making him unbearable to look at, and even worse to be near. The divine jewel on his forehead, the money that had protected him from hunger, thirst, illness, and fear, was removed, leaving behind a deep, bleeding wound, open and raw. Without the jewel, Ashwatthama lost his last shield against the miseries of mortal life. People and animals alike would avoid him. Shunned by all, alone and forgotten, he would wander the earth without companionship or comfort. He would be forced to live in hiding, witnessing the rise and fall of generations, the slow fading of righteousness, and the world slipping further into chaos, all while carrying the unbearable burden of his own actions. Stripped of honor, protection, and all that once made him proud, Ashwatthama's immortality became his curse. He would not be remembered as a hero, but as a symbol of what happens when divine power is misused, when rage overtakes wisdom, and when adharma is chosen over dharma. As written in the Saptika Parva of the Mahabharata, it was a curse that turned a proud warrior into a solitary soul, doomed to carry the weight of a single night's fury until the world itself resets. And so began the wandering. He became one of the Chiranjeevis, the 7 immortals mentioned in Itihasa and Puranic texts, who are destined to live until the end of this age, the Kali Yuga. But unlike others like Hanuman or Vibhishan, whose immortality served a higher divine purpose, Ashwatthama's was a curse, not a blessing. His life became one of isolation, suffering, and silent penance. His once mighty body, now afflicted with unhealing wounds, was a constant reminder of the night he abandoned Dharma. He did not live among men. He merely endured, roaming forests, mountains, and desolate places. His presence was neither divine nor entirely mortal, he belonged nowhere. Through the centuries, his name became more than just history, it became a legend wrapped in silence and sorrow. While the Mahabharata leaves his tale incomplete, folk traditions and oral accounts have carried it forward. Numerous accounts from pilgrims and spiritual travelers point to sightings of Ashwatthama in remote regions such as the Himalayas or along the banks of the Narmada River. He is often described as a tall, imposing figure with a persistent, unhealed wound on his forehead. Some claim to have seen him in silent prayer at temples, while others speak of unexpected encounters with a solitary man who offers help and then vanishes without a trace. Hermits and forest dwellers speak of brief, unsettling encounters with a man who fits the ancient description, wounded, wild-eyed, and seemingly burdened by a timeless curse. Locals describe a shadowy figure who visits temples before dawn, offers flowers at the shrine, and disappears before anyone sees his face. Whether these stories are myth or mystery, the essence remains. Ashwatthama lives on, not in glory, but in memory, a solemn echo of the truth that power without restraint, and loyalty without wisdom, can lead even the mightiest to ruin. But in the vast and intricate design of Sanatana Dharma, no suffering is without meaning, and no soul is beyond redemption. Even a life cursed by divine decree carries within it the seed of transformation. Ashwatthama's story, though shadowed by violence and remorse, is not fated to end in eternal despair. According to the Kalki Purana and other texts, at the end of this current age, Kali Yuga, when the world will be drowned in falsehood, greed, and lawlessness, Lord Vishnu will incarnate one final time as Kalki, the warrior avatar destined to destroy adharma and re-establish righteousness. In that final divine intervention, Ashwatthama's long exile will come to an end. Having borne the burden of his sins for thousands of years, wandering alone, stripped of pride, power, and peace, his long repentance will reach its end. Purified by time and torment, the warrior once cursed will be summoned once more, this time to uphold Dharma. With his ancient mastery of celestial weapons, knowledge forgotten by men and untouched since the days of the Mahabharata, he will now wield them in the service of righteousness. Ashwatthama will rise, not as an agent of vengeance, but as a protector of truth, a commander in Kalki's divine army during the final battle between light and darkness. Thus, even the most fallen soul is not forgotten in the eyes of Dharma. Through endurance, repentance, and the grace of the divine, Ashwatthama's end will be one of redemption, marking not only the close of his suffering, but the beginning of a renewed cosmic order. Ashwatthama's life is a reminder that strength without wisdom can lead to ruin, but even the deepest fall holds the spark of redemption. His curse became his path. His exile, a preparation. One day, he will rise not as a destroyer, but as a protector. What have you heard about him? How do you see his role in the final battle? Share your thoughts in the comments. Please like, share, and subscribe to Vibes of Divinity for more such timeless journeys from our scriptures. Until next time, inspire and stay inspired.